Constructed response. Practice makes perfect. Today we will learn and understand how to write a perfect constructed response. So let's practice. We're going to look at constructed response 7. The text that we read was Don't Send Bottled Water by Michael Moore. If you do not remember reading the article, or if you have not read the article yet, you definitely want to check that out. There's also an audio recording available as well. So what you're going to do is you're going to look at a few student examples that were submitted for this constructed response, and you're going to grade them using the LAC 2 rubric, which is based off of the Keystone scoring description. So in each category, writing skills, and using resources to support an answer, you're going to either give the student 0 points or 10 points in each category. So a 0 out of 30 means that the student's missing major elements, all of them, reading, writing, and support. A 10 out of 30 means that the student is missing several major elements. A 20 out of 30 means it's a pretty good draft, like it's a pretty good start at the response, but it's just missing something, like one key element. Definitely needs a little bit more work. And a 30 out of 30 means that the CR contains all of the elements that make a strong constructed response. So when you're thinking about writing skills, you're thinking about how the ideas are developed. Is it clear? Is it complete? Are they using conventional writing techniques? Is there an introductory statement? Are there transitional words moving from one idea to the next? Is there a conclusion? Punctuation, grammar, spelling are all important. We're focused more on major errors. A couple of minor errors aren't enough to take off all of the points in the writing skills, but you definitely want to proofread to eliminate as many errors as possible. Reading skills can be looked at in two ways. Either the student demonstrates a misreading of the passage, which can take off points, or the student doesn't answer the prompt completely. They can lose reading skills on misreading the question as well. And using resources to support an answer, you're looking at least 2, preferably 3, but at least 2 relevant quotes from the passage to support the answer. So these are citations and explanations, and they make up the bulk of the response. So your constructed response tip for life is to read the question or the prompt first. This way, as you go through reading the article, and again, if you haven't read Don't Send Bottled Water by Michael Moore, you're going to want to check that out before you get started. But before we even start reading the article, or before you pause the video and go check it out, let's see what we're looking for. So the CR prompt is summarize the main idea and key details of the text and explain how they support the author's argument. So as you're reading, you know what you're looking for, and it can be helpful for you to restate the prompt in your own words, form it into a question that shows that you understand what it is you're being asked to do, so that you know what it is you're being asked to consider as you're reading. I have to figure out the main idea of the text. That's one thing that we definitely need to do. We can't summarize the main idea if we don't know what it is. I have to figure out the key details of the text. Again, in order to complete our summary, we need to know what the key details are. And we have to explain how the author supports his argument. What's the purpose? So in order for us to explain how the key details support the author's argument about his main idea, we need to know what the main idea is, what the key details are, and what the author's argument is. In other words, what's the author's purpose? So we can sort of build our introductory statement, again, without even reading anything, just by restating the question. In this way, we come up with the author's purpose for writing this text is to, and think about the 3, remember PI, think about the 3 major categories authors write: to inform, to persuade, or to entertain. And then we want to insert the main idea. So what is the author trying to inform us about something, persuade us about something, or entertain us about something? And that will be the main idea. We'll get into the key details a little bit later in our writing to complete our summary. So let's look at student example number 1. You might want to pause the video so that you can take a look at it on your own, and then decide how you would score this student example. So this is a 0 out of 30. It's missing all of the major components of a constructed response. There are a couple of strengths here. We know that the student read the passage. We know that's related to the prompt. We know that it contains some relevant information. But the weaknesses are that it doesn't fully answer the prompt. So we can take off the reading points there. It's not that the student didn't read the article properly, because based on what we have here, we don't see any evidence of misreading, but we definitely don't have a complete summary. We don't know what the author's argument is, or why the author wrote it, and we don't have an explanation that ties it all together as the prompt asked. There are also no transitions. It's only 2 sentences. There's some errors in spelling and punctuation, nothing to, get crazy about here, but Flint is a proper noun. It's a place, so it should be capitalized, and of course this is the wrong form of there. The big thing that went south with the writing skills is to not use quotation marks. So this is a direct quote from the article, and you need to use quotation marks anytime you have a direct quote. Otherwise, it's plagiarism, and you never ever want to plagiarize. It's also missing specific and relevant information as well as explanations to support the answer. So although we do have that one quote, we don't have an explanation that ties it back to the answer. We don't have a complete answer. We don't have another citation or explanation, and we don't have a conclusion. So reading, writing, and support all need to be rethought in order to create a better revision for this particular response. So pause the video or take a second and just look at response number 2. How would you score this constructed response? So this is a 10 out of 30. We're seeing things move along a little bit. A couple of strengths. The student does answer the prompt. We see that she talks about the author's purpose, which is to persuade readers. We see that she has a summary of the main idea here, not to send bottled water, and also about who's responsible because of the decisions made by the governor of Michigan. So again, if you haven't read the article, check that out first. But the main idea is what the passage is mostly about. And this particular article is about 2 main points: not sending water and who's responsible for the water crisis. Those are the 2 major ideas that contribute to the main idea. We do have a direct quote, but again, you can see I have it highlighted in red. There were no quotation marks. Those need to be included. When you have a direct quote, if you don't cite your source, if you don't let your readers know that that came from somewhere else, it's plagiarism, and you never, ever, ever want to be responsible for plagiarizing. So definitely always cite your sources, place words that are not your own inside of quotation marks. So you can see really all we have here is an answer and kind of a bullet point for a citation. So we're missing a second citation. We're missing explanations. There are no transitions here, which contribute to the writing skills. There's no conclusion. It's really just an incomplete, kind of disjointed response. You can see in conclusion down there, it was never even, the sentence was never completed. So this is definitely a rough draft that needs to be reworked a little bit. Take a look at number 3. You'll want to pause the video and then think about what score you would give this one. So this is a 20 out of 30, and don't let the length necessarily fool you, because if you look here, first of all, we have the main idea of the article. Sending bottled water doesn't solve anything. The purpose of the passage was to persuade people to stop sending bottled water to Flint, Michigan. So we have not quite a complete response. That's why they're losing reading points on this CR, because we talked about it with the last example, we know that there are 2 main ideas in the article and this student only addresses 1. But the length of it is because 50% of the paragraph is actually a citation. It starts here in the 3rd sentence, and it ends about halfway through. So while it's a perfectly acceptable citation, it is pretty long. We might not need such a long citation to support the answer. The student does go on in 1 sentence, though, to tie the citation back to the answer, that it just makes problems much worse, the idea of sending bottled water to Flint. The student then goes on to cite a second citation supporting the same idea, and the explanation as well, tying it back together. And then, of course, the conclusion, you should not send bottled water bottles to Flint. Of course, that's according to the author. So going back to the author's argument, which is being persuasive. So all that's missing here really is the second part of the main idea in order to bump those reading skills up to 10. It's probably a quick revision to get a 30 out of 30 on this one. Let's look at example number 4. You might want to pause the video and then think about how you'd score this one. So this one is a 10 out of 30. Of course, a couple of technical errors you see here in red. It's an article, not a letter, so make sure you know the differences in the types of text that you're looking at. Also copying and pasting or citing, you want to make sure that you only have what you need. So there are a few extra things here, like how to properly cite in MLA or AP style, those sorts of things. But it's not really taking away from the passage, just like here. This is supposed to be an explanation for this citation, but then the student kind of runs that into setting up the second citation. So it's not very clear. It's a little bit, the writing is not, 100% what we would be looking for, but it's not taking away from the response in a way that necessarily means we need to take off points for it, because we can still understand the main idea and the point that the student is bringing up. So you can see that sort of posted there in yellow. The answer, what's done is done. We can't change it. It's in the past, and we can't fix. What we need to do is change how the future will go, etc. So it's not really answering the prompt, which is why the student lost reading points. It's definitely drawing a conclusion, making some inferences, having some insight, but it's not addressing the author's purpose for writing. And then you can see, as down here in yellow, as the student goes on, the passage is meant to show people the reality of things by throwing money at it. It's not going to give those families their lives back, etc. So, a little commentary, some conclusions, some inferencing and explaining of what the author's doing, but not in a way that's really addressing the prompt. So there's some weakness here with the support, as well as with, keeping the response tied directly to the prompt and within the text. Let's take a look at example number 5. You might want to pause the video and then decide what you would rate this particular constructed response. So this is a 30 out of 30. This is a well done constructed response. You can see that there are a couple technical errors. This really shouldn't be italicized, and it shouldn't be set apart from the rest of the paragraph. It should, kind of flow together. So there's a little disjointed or confusion here with how to construct the paragraph, but it's nothing that's really taking away from our understanding. The student sets up an example with transitions, so moving from the answer, hitting the author's purpose, hitting both parts of the main idea, transitioning into an example, a nice, not too long, not too short example that perfectly fits in with the answer, and then a really brief, this could be filled out a little bit more, the explanation, just to make it more clear and more thorough. But this works fine to support the citation and go back to the answer. And then, of course, you can see in green, moving on to the second citation and the second explanation. And finally, the student wraps up the response in conclusion by rewording the author's purpose to persuade people and rewording both parts of the main idea. We have a really nice summary that's complete and thorough, and a definite 30 out of 30 or a 3 out of 3. So very well done. So now that you're a CR expert, you'll want to use the skills and strategies that we learned and practice today every time you have to write a constructed response to boost your grade and prepare for the Keystone exams. Remember RACES, it's not about speed, it's about quality. And the better you're writing, the better you can express your ideas to someone else. How did this practice activity help you to better understand how to write a perfect constructed response?